Throughout galactic history, lightsabers have been more than weapons. They've been symbols. But not all lightsaber crystals or kyber crystals were meant for heroes or even for war at all. Some were forged in the hearts of dying worlds. Some were born from ancient rituals long forgotten. Others were so dangerous, so unstable, that entire orders tried to erase their very existence. From crystals that burned without light, to blades that whispered through the Force itself, to relics so cursed that they reshaped the fate of those that wielded them. Today, we're going to be exploring 5 of the rarest and some of the most forbidden lightsaber crystals in Star Wars lore. Artifacts so dangerous that most Jedi and Sith never even knew that they existed. And by the end, you'll understand why some powers were never meant to be found. If you want more deep lore like this, ancient weapons, forgotten Sith secrets, and lost Force knowledge, then make sure you're subscribed. Welcome, Lore Junkies. And now, let us examine the 5 crystals. The Ghostfire crystal is one of the rarest and also the most haunting crystals ever recorded in Star Wars lore, a relic so elusive that many Jedi scholars believe that it was a myth. Unlike kyber crystals that resonate loudly in the Force, the Ghostfire crystal exists in near silence both physically and spiritually. It does not sing, it does not hum. Some describe it as a haunting feeling in the back of their mind. Formed only within extremely rare geological formations known as Ghostfire spires, these crystals were found on remote, inhospitable worlds where radiation, pressure, and Force-saturated minerals converged into perfect balance. The spires themselves were often translucent, jagged structures rising from barren mountain ranges, and were so unstable that attempting to mine them often caused the entire formation to collapse. As a result, only a handful of Ghostfire crystals were ever recorded. When a Ghostfire is installed in a lightsaber, the crystal produced a blade unlike any other. Instead of a solid beam of color, the blade appeared pale, translucent, ghost-like, described as a faint shimmer or a mirage in the air. Its glow was muted, almost reluctant to exist at all, casting little light and leaving behind a faint afterimage whenever moved. Most striking of all with the Ghostfire is the blade emitted almost no sound. Where traditional lightsabers hummed and crackled, a Ghostfire blade only whispered, making it terrifyingly effective in stealth and in assassination. The crystal's connection to the Force was equally unusual. Ghostfire blades did not resonate loudly with their wielders. Instead, they required an extreme focus and emotional restraint. Those who attempted to wield one while emotionally unstable found the blade flickering or even refusing to fully ignite at all. Because of this, Ghostfire crystals were often associated with more disciplined Force wielders who valued precision, subtlety, and control. Legend suggests that the crystal subtly blurred the wielder's presence in the Force as well, making them more difficult to sense, an effect that likely contributed to its use by covert operations and shadow agents, favored over more battlefield warriors. Some accounts even claim that the Ghostfire blade left a lingering afterimage in the Force, confusing opponents who attempt to track its movement during combat. Unlike many Sith artifacts, the Ghostfire was not inherently corrupt or malevolent. It did not feed on suffering or emotion. Instead, it mirrored the wielder's intent. In the hands of a Jedi, the Ghostfire became a symbol of restraint and quiet resolve. In the hands of a dark-side wielder, it became an instrument of surgical precision, cold, detached, merciless. Because of its rarity and the danger involved in harvesting it, Ghostfire crystals were never widespread. Most knowledge of them survives only through fragmented records and scattered holocrons, as well as rare first-hand accounts. Some Jedi and Sith believe that several remain undiscovered, embedded in forgotten mountain ranges or dead worlds, waiting for someone disciplined enough and calm enough to awaken them. In a galaxy defined by roaring blades and explosive power, the Ghostfire crystal stands apart as a reminder that the most dangerous weapon is not the loudest, but the one that you never hear coming at all. Our next crystal is the Barab ingot. They were among the most volatile and dangerous lightsaber crystals ever utilized by Force wielders, born not of careful refinement, but of raw planetary devastation. Mined from the irradiated surface of the planet of Barab 1, these rare crystals were formed under such extreme conditions that they seemed to burn from within. The planet itself was saturated with lethal levels of radiation, making the recovery of even a single unstable ingot a near suicidal endeavor. Those who did survive the harvest often carried permanent damage, proof that Barab did not give up its secrets willingly. But when refined and installed in a lightsaber, a Barab ingot produced a blade unlike any other. Rather than emitting a clean, stable beam, the blade burned violently, its energy volatile. The plasma shimmered and writhed as if barely contained, radiating heat so severe that it could ignite targets on contact. Wounds that were inflicted by such a blade were not merely cauterized, but scorched at a molecular level, often continuing to burn long after the strike had landed. Unlike traditional kyber crystals, Barab ingots were also unpredictable. Their color varied widely, appearing in nearly every hue depending on the mineral composition and radiation saturation. This instability made them both feared and also revered, as wielding one required constant control. A moment of imbalance could cause the blade to flare dangerously, or even destabilize entirely. Because of its volatility, Barab ingots were rarely used by Jedi, who valued harmony and balance within their weapon. Instead though, they found favor among darkside wielders, those who saw danger as a virtue rather than a flaw. To wield the Barab crystal was to accept that the weapon itself was barely contained, violence a reflection of the wielder's own inner chaos. But now that we've discovered some of the darker crystals, let's go towards the lighter aspect of the Force. The next crystal on our list is known as Bnar's Sacrifice. It is also among the rarest but most spiritually profound lightsaber crystals ever recorded. Unlike most kyber crystals, which are mined or formed from natural resonance, this crystal was shaped through sacrifice, physical and spiritual, by the ancient Jedi Master Bnar. Bnar was one of the oldest and wisest Jedi in galactic history. He was a member of the near-immortal Neti species, and a living archive of Jedi knowledge and histories. Over centuries, he devoted himself not to warfare, but to the preservation of history, balance, and understanding the Force. When the Great Sith War threatened to annihilate the Jedi Order and the knowledge that it had preserved, Bnar made a decision that few ever could. He willingly surrendered a portion of his own life essence to create a crystal that would endure beyond him. The resulting crystal was unlike any other. Rather than being mined or grown through traditional means, it was formed through sacrifice and imbued with the Jedi's will, as well as his profound connection to the Force. When instilled in a lightsaber, the crystal attuned itself exclusively to its wielder, refusing to function for anyone else. In this way, it mirrored the Jedi Master's philosophy that power should never be taken, only earned. The blade produced by Bnar's Sacrifice was often described as calm, luminous rather than fierce. It radiated clarity rather than aggression, and those who wielded it reported a heightened sense of awareness, patience, and spiritual focus. Unlike more volatile crystals, it did not hunger for conflict, nor did it amplify rage. Instead, it seemed to temper its wielder, reinforcing control and purpose. After Bnar's death, the crystal passed through the hands of Jedi historians and scholars alike, eventually becoming a symbol of the Order's highest ideals. To wield it was not a mark of power, but of worthiness. In this way, Bnar's Sacrifice endured long after his physical form was long gone. His essence continued to guide those who carried the blade, just as he once guided generations of Jedi before. In terms of color, the crystal manifested as a muted earthen hue, often described as deep amber or a warm brown gold. This is a color never seen in standard kyber crystals. This tone was not a product of corruption or artificial tuning though, but of absolute balance. The crystal reflected the Jedi himself, ancient, grounded, deeply connected to the living Force, passion over aggression. But now let's go back to the dark. The Blackwing crystal was one of the most disturbing and unnatural lightsaber components ever documented. Less a crystal, and more a manifestation of corruption and infection. Born from the horrors of the Blackwing virus, these crystals were not formed naturally, but instead emerged in areas saturated with the virus's necrotic influence, most notably within the quarantine ruins of Dathomir. The Blackwing virus itself was a Sith-engineered bioweapon, designed not to kill, but to reanimate its victims into mindless, ravenous husks. When the virus saturated crystalline formations within the planet's crust, it produced a rare and a volatile substance that could be refined into a lightsaber crystal. Unlike traditional kyber, the crystals did not resonate with the living Force. Instead, they pulsed with something wrong, an echo of decay. When installed within a lightsaber, a Blackwing crystal produced a blade of swirling black smoke and ash, almost vaporous in appearance. The blade looked less like coherent energy and more like a Terran reality, trailing dark matter as it moved. Strikes from such a weapon carried an unsettling quality, as if the blade were consuming life rather than simply cutting. Victims struck by the blade often exhibited signs of necrotic trauma, reinforcing the idea that the crystal retained traces of the virus itself. The Blackwing crystals thrived on decay. They were unpredictable and dangerous even to the wielder. They reported prolonged exposure contaminated the mind, eroded sanity in much the same way the virus consumed the body. As a result, these crystals were rarely used outside of desperate or fanatical circumstances. The most notable discoveries of the Blackwing crystals occurred during the Galactic Civil War, when scavengers and mercenaries explored the quarantine facilities on Dathomir. There, amidst ruined labs and the remains of the infected Imperial personnel, several of these crystals were successfully recovered. Their existence became one of the more grim reminders of how far the Sith science had once gone, and how close it came to erasing the boundary between life, death, and the Force. In the end, Blackwing crystals were not revered like Kyber, or mastered like alchemy. They were feared, not because they were powerful, but because they represented a version of the dark side that devoured everything, including its wielder. And now we have reached the final crystal of our list, Bane's Heart. The Bane's Heart crystal is one of the most infamous and unsettling lightsaber crystals ever recorded in Sith history. A weapon not forged, but claimed through blood, domination, and a dark will. The crystal was gifted to Zana by her master Bane, following the 7th Battle of Ruusan. More than a token of favor, it was a test. Bane believed that true Sith power could only be proven through survival, the breaking of one's fear. The crystal known as Bane's Heart embodied those principles. Once bonded to its wielder, it resonated their rage and their ambition. When ignited, the crystal produced a blade that pulsed with dark crimson energy. Sometimes it discharged arcs of raw force power. It was not merely a weapon, but a test of worth. Only those strong enough could command it and wield it safely. Anyone unworthy who attempted to use the crystal would find it resisting them, draining their strength, or even lashing back with destructive force. In this way, Bane ensured that his legacy would reject the weak. After the fall of the Sith Order of Bane, the crystal's path grew darker and more chaotic in the timeline. It eventually came into the possession of a Dark Jedi, one who was later slain by General Grievous during the Clone Wars. Grievous claimed the weapon for his own now, and stored it aboard his personal starfighter, keeping it as a trophy rather than wielding it in a lightsaber himself, perhaps wary of its will, or perhaps even recognizing that it only answered to true Sith. The crystal later resurfaced during the Galactic Civil War, recovered and wielded by NK Necrosis, a darkside enforcer tied to Imperial experiments involving Sith relics and General Grievous. When the droid was killed, the crystal vanished once again, its fate uncertain, hidden, waiting for another worthy master. What makes Bane's Heart especially feared is not its power, but its judgment and its history. It doesn't amplify the Force, but it does test resolve. In that way, Bane's Heart perfectly embodies the philosophy of Bane: strength through suffering, power through survival, and extinction for the unworthy. And with that, we've come to the end of our journey through some of the rarest and most dangerous lightsaber crystals known, relics not just of power, but of sacrifice and legacy. From the Ghostfire, whose pale, spectral blade flickers like a whisper between worlds, to the volatile Barab ingot, burning with unstable living flame, to Bnar's sacrifice, a crystal shaped by patience, wisdom, and devotion, to the corrupted fury of Bane's Heart, pulsing with the dark side and the will of Darth Bane. And finally, the Blackwing crystal, a weapon born of decay, leaving only death in its wake. Each of these crystals carries more than power. They carry history, consequence, and a price that few will ever bear. So the question for the end of today's holocron is, if you had the choice, which one would you claim? Which of the crystals calls to you? And if you want to explore more forgotten artifacts, forgotten relics, and weapons, the deeper lore behind the shadows of the galaxy itself, then make sure to stay tuned. The archives are far from empty. And as always, may the Force be with you.